Great Britain is still the greatest country on earth, and a lot of people died making it great. On November the 11th, 1918, World War I came to an end, marking the anniversary of the armistice and the end of fighting alongside the Western Front. Armistice is Latin for stand or still arms, and is an official day to remember all those who served past and present. And our war heroes died preserving freedom and democracy. They lost their lives to make this country and indeed the world a better place. But looking at this country now, I have to ask myself whether the TikTok-obsessed social media generation would be up for doing the same thing. DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion, have taken over the narrative, leaving many of our young confused about the most basic of things. Social media deluding our children, where selfies and likes from followers they are never likely to meet have taken over the agenda. But these are all freedoms that they owe to those who came before them. Would they fight for king and country? But this country is renowned for upholding freedom and democracy. It is often forgotten that thousands of British sailors died ending the slave trade. Whilst it was a horrendous business and legal at the time, Britain was the first to end it. The cost to the Royal Navy: one sailor died for every 9 slaves freed. Over 52 years, 17,000 perished, either in action or of disease. And among the losses was the 10-gun sloop HMS Waterwitch, which spent 21 years hunting down slave ships until one sank her in 1861. Yet the ridiculous call for reparations is deafening. Why are no other countries really being held to account? Great Britain is indeed great, and many from all over the world risked their lives to get here, to take advantage of our tolerant culture, often fleeing places where freedom and democracy are in short supply. Which is why it's distressing for those of us who love this country, the patriots, seeing its very essence being destroyed by those who take advantage of our good nature and hospitality. There is nothing wrong with patriotism. There is nothing wrong with loving your country so much that you are willing to die for it. Today is a very special day as we pay our respects to those who went before us, our war dead who lost their lives to keep us all safe. So it's time to stop talking Britain down. It's time to really appreciate the sacrifice that others made on our behalf so that we can enjoy the freedom and democracy that we enjoy today. Well, joining me now, former senior military intelligence officer and veteran Philip Ingram. Philip, thank you so much for joining me. Philip, it's so important to celebrate and sort of commemorate, in a sense, commemorate our war dead. What are your thoughts? I talked about how I don't think the young people of today would be that interested in fighting for king and country. Do you get that impression?
Well, it's interesting. I was at the service in Birmingham city centre today, and a large proportion of those that were marching past were from university officer training corps elements and cadets. There was a large number of youngsters from all different ethnic backgrounds marching with the veterans and with serving personnel. So I think if you get to every generation, they'll always say that the next generation is not going to be as good as we were. But actually, when the chips are down, we're proven wrong every time. So I do think the current generation, if they were put in the same circumstances, would stand up and do their duty.
It was good to see as well that there were no sort of counter-style protests, no pro-Palestinian demonstrations during this day. Just this one day, nobody's saying that freedom of speech shouldn't be allowed, but it was really good to see that this day was respected.
Oh, very much so. You know, those that have given the ultimate sacrifice, whether it be in conflict or at their own hand because of the demons that they've had to deal with in coming back, have done that to give the freedoms so that people can protest safely and peacefully for whatever their beliefs. And therefore, it's up to everyone to respect today and respect that sacrifice, to allow them to have those freedoms and not to hijack it for silly political reasons and to try and just get their voice out using the sacrifice that's been given by so many over so many years.
We're very good at all this pomp and ceremony, but the truth is that our armed forces are depleted and a lot of veterans aren't given the kind of assistance that they need, and we don't really look after our soldiers that well. What are your thoughts on how fit we are if we were to need to go to war again? How fit are we?
Oh, our military has been decimated. It is not fit to fight at the moment, no matter what Chief of the Defence Staff says. We've got huge recruiting problems, difficulty in manning the units, formations and equipment that we've got at the moment, a complete paucity of equipment, especially within the army. The RAF is suffering huge shortages of pilots, and yet it continues to bluff itself that it's got the ability to fight. The government needs to get a grip, and I hope the defence review that's coming up gets that grip, sorts the problems out that there are, and enables the military to grow properly. It's a hugely wasteful organisation, needs to be made much more efficient. And when it comes to looking after veterans, the Minister of Defence washes its hands of veterans as soon as they leave. It passes that responsibility out to the third sector, to charities. So that's why we see veterans shaking the tin to buy poppies so that charities like the British Legion can look after them after their employer has kicked them out. It then goes to the NHS for health, but their veterans are the same priority as everyone else, every other minority group that's out there, and to local authorities. And again, they don't get a priority because everyone's got a priority. Well,
listen, Philip, thank you so much for your thoughts. Really good to talk to you. That is a former senior military intelligence officer and also veteran Philip Ingram. Thank you very much. Well, joining me now, former British Army officer Stuart Crawford. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me. Oh, is he here? Ah, there you are. Stuart, there you are. Well, did you know, Stuart, I was really pleased to see that today there wasn't any real protests around the ceremony or anything, and it was kind of left as a day for us to remember our war dead. What are your thoughts on the day?
Yes, I think I'm very pleased too that there was no real disruption to what is our day of national mourning, if you like. The paradox is, of course, the ability of people to choose to protest on an important day for the nation as today is actually part and parcel of why so many did lose their lives during the last century or so, but particularly in our two wars of national importance, the First World War and the Second World War. But I'm very pleased that our National Day of Mourning was allowed to proceed without interruption, and I think that's entirely appropriate.
Absolutely. Do you think that young people watching this now would be prepared to do what our servicemen did all those years ago? Because when I sort of have a chat with my daughter, she's seen things on TikTok and all the other stuff, and I think to myself, these people are not going to fight for this country.
Well, that's a very good question. And funnily enough, it was a question that was asked at the Oxford Union. I think it was 1938 or 1937, where the question was debated, would this House fight for king and country? And the answer came back, no. And yet, a few years later, many of them, if not most of them, were in uniform, and some had already paid the ultimate sacrifice. I think it's easy to talk about how you might react to a war of national survival in the abstract, but it's another thing altogether when you're presented with it, particularly if family members have been affected by bombings or some other death at sea or something like that. So I'm confident that in the right sort of circumstances, that today's youth would probably rally to the flag, if I could put it that way.
And why do you think it is just so important to continue to commemorate those who fought for our freedoms?
Well, I think that, and again, I'll go back to particularly the Second World War, where had we not been part of the ultimately successful side in that war, then British society today might be very different from what we experience now. And so it is that and the other wars which we are commemorating are a part of the formative process which has brought the United Kingdom and other countries to where they are today. So it's an important part of history. History is important not because it repeats itself necessarily, but because it sometimes paraphrases itself. And if we look at today's dangers from, revanchist Russia and in the Middle East, et cetera, and the fact that our armed forces are relatively run down these days, it is a bit reminiscent of 1933 to 1938, when we just managed to pick up our defences in time to counter Hitler and his assault on the Western world.
Yeah, because I was actually just going to talk about that, because we do this ceremony very well. We do all the stuff very well. But if you look at our depleted armed forces, I think the estimated number of days we'd be able to survive in a war, say, similar to the one that Ukraine are fighting against Russia, I think was 8 days with the stuff we have. So we're very good at acting it out and saying how we care about all of this. But when it comes to it, even if people were prepared to lay their lives, we simply don't have the equipment or anything, really, do we?
No, and I think first and foremost, we don't have an adequate number of personnel in any of the three services, so that the Navy can't crew its ships. The Army can put a very, very modest contribution into the field, and the RAF doesn't have enough pilots. But there are lots and lots of different reasons for that, and we could discuss that for the next 2 hours and still not get anywhere. But your point is absolutely correct. We have run our armed forces down to the point where they may not be credible anymore. Luckily, we don't plan to fight on our own because we're part of NATO. And NATO's our biggest ally is obviously the United States of America. But of course, that might change with President Trump entering a second term at the White House. So I think we really do need to pay attention and start sorting out our military before it's too late.